Yeah, so it's Easter Monday, 2022, and I know you want to talk about the army camp in Westerfield. So,
Do you want me to start?
yeah.
Oh, well, I can remember the very first day it started. My father and I were reaping oats up near the cemetery called the Grave Paddock. We biked home for dinner, and there was a fellow waiting at the gate in a brown car, and I heard him say, "Mr. Langdon," and I kept biking, went home for my lunch or dinner. Then when he arrived home, my mother said, what did that fellow want at the gate? And the old man said they want the land over the road for military purposes. Well, you could imagine round the kitchen table someone taking our land, and then nothing happened for quite a while, or a few weeks, and then the next thing a drag line come down from the Birches, that's Public Works camp up at the hills, and then the shingle trucks arrived. They were putting roads in. There was 96 carpenters come down from Christchurch.
Wow.
And there was a cook shop. There was a woman with a little kid. She did the cooking, and I think the carpenters must have helped her, but then it was 40-hour week. They all cleared out on a Friday night and come back Sunday night and Monday morning. It was called the Durham Street Syndicate. And the first thing they put up was a big mess hall. There was 4 great halls and a big cook shop in the middle with concrete, and that's where the oil-fired stoves and everything were. Well, that was the start. There was roads going in. There was a sergeant's mess put in at the same time. There was concrete mixers, carpenters, and the roofs of them, they couldn't get roofing on those days, so they had a locally made roof made out of polite, about a quarter of an inch thick. They screwed that on, and the water supply for the whole area is a separate story. It was an enormous effort because there was 5 of those camps. We had A camp, it was A, B, C, D and E, and the B was just back further. They had about 50 acres, I suppose, or past 2 paddocks, one off the council. The one back further was 125 acres they just grabbed. The late Mr. Muirhead, he had 3 on his farm, took about 300 acres off him, and the reason that they settled on our place and his place, my father and Harry Muirhead were great tree planters, and they wanted somewhere to park the trucks under the trees, and that attracted them there, because my father talked to a brigadier there one day, and he said, "Oh, we flew the area, and that's how we came here." Well, you imagine the old man gave him a bit of a lecture, and it was near the railway too, because that was that. Then there was another part of it later on. Of course, the army huts arrived too. They were little prefabricated ones, 4 men in a hut, dozens and dozens of huts, and then they had a recreation hut and it was a separate deal altogether. It was made of the malthoid roof and creosote walls, fairly big building, and it had table tennis and billiard tables and card tables and a canteen in it. And a padre, and the old padre lived in there with 1 or 2 others. His accommodation was there, and we used to take the milk, sell them milk every day, about half a bucketful for their old canteen, and the old padre used to give us a cake of chocolate if we took it over there. But the trucks, you've got no idea the trucks that they had there. Under the trees was trucks parked everywhere, and there was what else was the roads, because they pulled all the fences out, cut a lot of trees down, and then later on in the war they decided they didn't have enough building, because ours were brigade headquarters. They decided to put up another one for the officers' mess. It's elaborate, and that it was never used. The concrete's still up there. It was a big concrete area and 4 big rooms out for them, and they put in a hospital. That was never used. It had 3 wards. We used to get in there after they left it on their bikes. You could bike up and down the corridor at the back, all round. A huge septic tank. That was part of it. There there was other buildings, storerooms were never used, and all sorts of buildings. They never had sentries on the gates, but we had brigade headquarters. The one back further, the 125 acres, that was the engineers. They put the bridge across the river down here. And there was one was 2nd Canterbury. They were in C camp, which was just down below us there. And I don't know who was in D camp, but E camp were Targa mounted rifles in there. They had some tanks there. It was further on down. But it was all connected up with water supply, which I'd go into later. It was a hell of a big deal. The Public Works put that in for them. And it was, then they decided to go on manoeuvres. Might be 50 truckloads of soldiers clear out for the few days, and then they'd come back. They'd done the basic training in Burnham, and then they come down here. But it was brigade headquarters. The old brigadier was over at our place, and there was staff, there was men and trucks going up. We got our road tar sealed, was the first one in the county. That was a plus. That'll do for a while. I'd have to think about water for the big kitchens and showers, so shower houses and wash basins and God knows what. But they put in a huge steam boiler, great big one, and you can imagine that. And they had the clay pipes, about a 12-inch one, and the steam pipes inside it were lagged, and the steam was taken away to these other cook shops. And that's it. They went into huge cylinders. That's how they got the hot water. Mm-hmm. The old big old boiler house used to blow the whistle at 5 o'clock. And that was a big boiler. Mm. But then the next time when they come back to build the officers' quarters, they put another boiler in. That was never used either. I don't know why, but at the time, if you were a Labour supporter, it said, "Oh, it didn't cost anything. The Americans paid for it." And if you're in opposition, they said, "Just another one of their blunders." So nothing's really changed. But the water supply was a big thing. They put a lot of other buildings up, truck workshop. But there was trucks coming and going and parked under the trees and men going everywhere. Then they'd all clear out. I guess they went overseas, or some of them did. But the canteen was something they used to open it up at night for coffee and stuff. And my mother organised the women around the district to go and work in that canteen at night. They were quite popular with the soldiers. Mm. And they had a concert party used to come out in town occasionally, which we were neighbours, because we were neighbours of them, got in. Mm. And but the roads and everything, of course everybody said they'd never plough the land again, but it was only the same stones and shingles what was coming out of the pit, so now it's all gone. But the water supply alone, it was something I'll tell about that when I get round to it. It was, well, the Public Works camp arrived at the same time, about 12 houses and about 12 single bench huts. Mm. They put the big reservoirs in and all the septic tanks, and she was a go in, I can tell you. The road was busy, but it was a brigade, so that was different parts of the brigade, I suppose. Number 40 brigade it was. They had a lot of, I tell you what, they had a lot of late model Ford trucks, Chevs, and a lot of Studebakers. Mm. And but they commandeered them. If you'd just bought a new one, just the war started, they commandeered them. They took them back off people who owned them.
Really?
All the latest trucks parked up there by the dozens. Mm. And some big ones. Wasn't until later on in the war, the American Jeeps and that started to arrive. Mm. So that was, yeah, they took advantage of my father's place in Muirheads. They lost about 300 acres to them. Just took it.
Yes.
Farmers never had the say those days that they would have been up in arms today over something like that. And there's loss of income and every other thing, you had to absorb it. So that was, but the big boilers, they couldn't get water up to them, so they had to put another pipe in from the big water race. And it was, everybody laughed about that. Yeah, well, it was fair game. But the big recreation huts, that was something. It was different funding because there was different building, but their other buildings were real permanent. Those polite roofs, and they were well built, made out of Remu heartwood and all that, and concrete mixers galore, and paint. They used to mix their own paint in great big drums, and they'd all vacate the place then for the weekend. That's where we went over and poked through everything. And it was a good poke round. And they get to know some of those old fellas. But there must have been because there was other four camps that had been developed at the same time. They didn't have an officer's mess, but they would have a sergeant's mess and the big mess rooms, boilers. They were further down the line. That was a big event, I can tell you. I think they probably paid us for the land eventually. There was nothing they could do about it, and then they give you a first option to buy it back again, so which he did. And just at the end of the war, 1945, was a hell of a windstorm here in Canterbury. Flattened hundreds of trees. Well, then they turned up with trucks and they pulled these trees out all around the paddock where the camp had been, with the big American buddy winch trucks and four-wheel drives, and Christ, you never heard the likes. Scattered all the stumps and stuff around the paddock, then abandoned it all. But we got over that. But there was a big outfit that camp when it was going. It was a murder in Tynwald, because they blamed all the soldiers, and it was a hell of an inspection. All the camps had to get their clothes out in case there was a spot of blood on them. It had nothing to do with them, so they got over that. But there was no shortage of men. Then when the war ended, there was a whole lot of, about a dozen old officers, colonels and majors. They just sat around there for a few months and did nothing till they caught up with them. Same with the public works. A few old fellows got hung on there for a long time. And he used to have an old workshop in the corner of the paddock. The army had gone, but they'd forgotten about him, I suppose. Then he got put off, and he said, "Oh, well, all good things come to an end," he says. We were there one morning, the boss used to come out in town in his little truck. It was raining, there were three of them in this old shed. We heard the boss pull up, two of them hid behind the door. Well, the old boss entertained them. Oh, I suppose he knew what was going on, didn't worry him anyhow. We're a different world then. People just do as they liked, I suppose. But, that's the old army camp. But I'd like to do the water one separately, or, well, you can do it now if you like.
Yeah, because it ties into that, into the army camp as well. So
one day we'll measure it in the truck. You got the water from what was called Sheet Swamp. There was a spring over there. These 6-inch pipes, 6 foot long, imagine it, and they sealed them with a rubber ring. And they put them right across the paddock, gravity, to that reservoir. But it wasn't big enough, so they had to put in the big round one. Then they distributed that in 4-inch pipes back to the other one and pumped up into tanks. The one at our place was piped up, a steel pipe up to near the old shingle pit there, and pumped up into tanks. The rest would be gravity. It went all the way down the railway line with 4-inch pipes. And they cut the ditches with a Latorno leading wheel grader behind a big Clee tractor. And then these public works fellas would lay all the pipes and join them with a rubber ring, stop them leaking. You know, that was a tremendous job. But they also put the septic tanks in, and they used to get for the soak pits. They brought the big stones down from around Mayfield. We used to go up there in the truck with them. Every tip truck in Ashburton was doing all that work. And the soak pits, they went out to what we call the scrub, and they got the carnica branches and put over the stones, then they put the dirt on. They're still, the old soak pits will be still in that place. And they put the septic tanks in. The public works did all that. But then, of course, the biggest laugh was from Sheet's property with the gravity feed water. Sheets told them at the time they'd seen that spring go dry and don't take no notice, and it did. So they had to shift downstream about several hundred metres, put a pumping station in, and pump it up to connect up with their 6-inch pipes across the paddock. So that was another big laugh, because you think, yeah, well, that's where people were. It's still are, I suppose. something goes wrong with the government department.
Cost is no object with
Of
them.
course, that public works camp was in itself was a big thing. And the old public works houses, they'd be 24 foot long, divided into 3 rooms, the kitchen in the middle and a bedroom each end, and it'd be 8 foot wide, and a wood fire, and a hut at the back door with a copper in and a bath, so they could boil the copper. And they had night soil, night carts there for them. And that single men were further on, they had just had single huts, they had a little hot dog stove in it, and they never had a bathroom. They had a bit of a wash outside and an old sink. They're single blokes. Where's going to yard to them? And but the 3 engineers that came with the public works, they had bungalows up near the corner, separate from the other mob, and they had septic tanks and everything. So they were engineers from somewhere. They worked it all out, but that reservoir in itself is just full of reinforced steel. It's still there. That 2 reservoirs are there. But those big leaning wheel graders or something, a bloke stood up on top of the wheel. They were developed in California for a big irrigation scheme there. Latorno is the name of them. The big Clee tractors are not around now, but they were big crawlers. Of course, they had to go under the railway line and through the roads and everything else. And that was a big deal. Humes, I think, made the pipes. They must have made thousands of them. One day I could measure it in my car where they went. They could how many kilometres of pipes they had. A lot of pipes are still there around gateways and that. You could dig them up. That was, that public works thing was a big thing on its own. People wouldn't live in those old houses, but they lived in them those days. And one old bloke, there was only 1 or 2 of them owned cars. One had a big old Willys, and he used to get, when they put the pumping station over at the big creek, because the spring had gone dry, it was run on petrol. He got enough petrol out of that to keep his car going. I see him one night getting along the road on the bike carrying a 4-gallon tin. He was a bit self-sufficient, I suppose, a big deal. There was a lot of stuff come up on rail, but never any troop train. Oh, they had down below the station, they had a place they could turn the railway engine. So we went out in the paddock and then round the other way again, just out and back, turn, and they run electric power down to it. Putting the power in was poles across the paddocks for miles too. Big deal. The B camp, it had similar to one, but they wouldn't have had quite as many buildings, but there were a lot of big store sheds there, proper buildings. They were never used. A lot wasn't, but talk about trucks. They must have gone through some gas because you could get a ride around in the trucks with those soldiers if you wanted to. We had pretty good terms with them. But dust on the road, but that's why we got it tar sealed. British Pavements did that. That was quite a big deal too those days. But that big drag line they brought down from the Birch's public works, she could load a truck in no time. The bloke driving it, he had several fingers missing. He'd been in the machinery business, but he could work the levers. He used to swing her out and drop it out. 2 or 3 of those, they had a truck full of shingle on, they were gone. We were in an old cousin drove a truck for Mid-Canterbury Transport. We were riding around with him one day. When he went past another bloke on the road, he switched the key on off and like a backfire. The bloke thought he had a blowout. It's just a bit of entertainment. Oh God, what a bloody performance. But the big, that was, you got no idea the action that was there. You get 90 carpenters going there. But they're all shut down at the weekends, of course. But then they started arriving back Sunday night and Monday morning. It was, of course, they used a hell of a lot of paint. For a start, they painted the buildings a cream colour, and then as time went on, they painted them green, I suppose. But don't forget, as the Japanese were coming, they stopped broadcasting the weather reports here. It was, they were shitting themselves. People here wondering where the Japs were going, where they were going to land. They thought they might land at Wakanui, and it was compulsory to have an air raid shelter in Timaru. Everybody had a hole in the backyard.
Really?
Yeah. It was a close run thing, to say the least. The bridge down here, they never got it finished. They got the stringers up and everything. They built out of blue gum. They used to get the timber from they go into any plantation, and they must have taken it to a sawmill and got the stringers. You could walk across it. They never got the deck on it. That's why we called our place River Bridge. But there was hordes of trucks going up and down, and we weren't sure of men. But that was the engineers. But I don't know, how's the brigade headquarters? I don't know what was in one of the camps down, but C Camp and 2nd Canterbury Rifles or something. I think they had about 800 there at one part of it. They must have carted a lot of tucker to them, but we didn't know about. But the carting a half a bucket of milk over every day was a lucrative business. I never found out what they got for it, but and if we didn't take it over, they'd send a bloke over a truck to get it. Old Father Halley, they all had a padre, I said. They lived in those recreation huts, as they called them. We had the Catholics. The one back further was Church of England, further was Presbyterian, one was Salvation Army. I don't know what the other one was, but they used to have a church service on Sunday morning over here. Some of the local Catholics attended it. There was one bloke in a Model T. We were poking around there on a Sunday morning in the army. One fellow, he got in with his kids or the family, and the old Model T had shot backwards, and there was one pole, it was a temporary pole to a temporary setup, and he hit it with a spare wheel on the back. It must hit the other pedal at the same time. The old pole went like that, and then he took off. But I reckon after church they'd been into the Terps. In fact, I was positive they had a bit of a top up, I suppose. I only thought of that later, because I was still laughing about that. But yeah, they'd have a bit of a top up. The concert parties come out Mashburton were good. One of the scenes they had at the acts they had at the concert party one night, they did it with lights, and they're operating on a fella, and it cut him open. You had to pull a bloody tulip out of it. Right, everybody laughed. The people would laugh at that today. They'd go mad, wouldn't they? Yeah, I can still remember that act. But we used to go over there every night after school and poke around and see what they're up to. Christ, it was a go in, I can tell you. But that water scheme, that was a big scheme. The Public Works just laying all that. They dug them up again, a hell of a lot of them.
Really?
They left them around gateways here. Some of the gateways along the road will still have them there. One day we've got the digger, we might dig some up. They were only 4 inch, but they supplied all the camps except for their boilers. They had all kinds of creeks for those boilers had a old car seat in there in the old race. It was all fed like into the coal into her. They sit and watch the gauges there. She's warm in there. You go and sit in there with them. You see what they were up to, but I was always scared the bloody was going to blow up. This bloody great big end, this bloody great boiler, and Christ is fizzling and carrying on. But that pipe of steam, I think there's a cylinder up at Dover which I outlived. It was to be a hot water cylinder. They must have had a coil inside them or something to heat the water. But it was a big deal. Christ, there was some steam coming out of it, I can tell you, but the second one was never used. There was another one of their blunders. But that was the army. The Public Works, yeah, it was quite, I think there's about a dozen houses there, married people, and about a dozen single man's huts. But see, there's a big Public Works camp at what they call the Birches over at Surrey Hills, where they put the concrete pipes around the hills, and they brought them down from there. But they had a good bus service. Now they had a good bus service because they'd take people to town for the day. They'd pick them up about 9. We had to go to secondary school on it, and bring them, drop them off, left town about at 4 o'clock again. There were 2 brothers owned that. They had a great service, did a great job because Public Works used to get the tucker. There was a grocer's place at Tynnerall that he run what they call the store cart. He used to come up round here. Well, he was carting the tucker up to those people who never had any cars. I don't know how the hell they lived half them, but they did. So times have changed. People, and everybody walked to school. We all walked to bloody school. And those public works kids all walked from just where our big woolshed was, that one. There's a separate area where the three engineers, they had little bungalows, and I know they had septic tanks and that, but others were on the night carts. So that's, I suppose it was somewhere for them to work. The hard case of the old single blokes and the old huts down there. There was a yarn once that a bloke put his bacon, they cook outside, some of them. No, he didn't, he had his old little stove going, but he went outside for a while, so he put bacon and eggs in the pan whenever the pan was empty. So they would watch. They reckon some of them watched who bought stuff, they would put it. Christ, they were hard to do, those blokes. But they worked away there. Yeah, there was. Oh, that's about it. But the Muirheads took a hell of a hit over that. That half his farm was just taken. I ploughed one paddock for him after the war down there. Negative people, of course there's still negative people about, they said they'd never plough the ground again, but it was only the same stones as what was already there. And it's amazing how they've gone into the soil, you wouldn't see some of them now. Well, that was sheer an experience, I can tell you. Oh, that'll do it.
So what was your old man's name?
John.
John. Yeah.
He come back, he was wounded at Passendale.
All right.
And then he started farming after the First War. Yeah. And they had 1,000 ewes, and if you feed the stock, you grew about 80 acres of bloody turnips. That was farm, all the plains were farmed like that before they come to it. And they had to fence these turnips with cyclone wire, and I used to work for him every Monday. Once a week you had to give the old ewes a fresh break of turnips. Roll all the netting up, shift it over, put it all up again, about 20 chain, one hit. We were all morning there working on that job, but then you grub the turnips up to get the shells that they didn't eat. Many a day I put in grubbing bloody turnips. That was all right. He was a good farmer. He had good stock. But it wasn't until into the 50s when the wool boom, they got more money to spend, and the times changed altogether. New ideas. Those days they paid their farm off. He ended up with a freehold farm, and when he retired it was freehold. He had enough money in the bank for buying his house in town. But now the banks own half the farms. So they talk about borrowing $1 million and something else, but that's how times have changed. I suppose it was paying it off and made you more independent, but that was the way it was. I do a hell of a lot of work with his old tractor. Day after day, I'd take me lunch with me for the day. I'd work away up the top of the farm. She never had a road gear. She had a good tractor, but never had a road gear. I used to ride the bike up. When your ship went up there to go grubbing turnips or ploughing, you took the old trolley with drums of kerosene on it.
What sort of tractor was it?
Case. It's still around some of these vintage days. She was the latest thing out, but never had a road gear. But you started them on petrol, and then when you got a height, you switched her on to kerosene. There's 2 tanks on them.
Was kerosene cheaper?
Yeah, power kerosene it was. You couldn't. You only had, it was lighting kerosene. You could run that in a lantern, which everybody had instead of a torch. But you put power kerosene at once, you couldn't see it for bloody smoke. But see, it was a low grade, I suppose. And never had a self starter, but you got to swing up, get the old handle and pull her right, so you go all right. And the winter time I used to have to drain the bloody water out into a 10-gallon drum for the night and put it back next morning. I've never heard of antifreeze. You probably wouldn't buy it anyhow, so be careful. Bloody go in that was. But he had good sheep, and that was the hallmark, but he you couldn't farm like that today. They could have everything. Those days they didn't borrow money like they do now. But that's all right. But all the new grass soils improved since then too. Well, everything has. And lime was a big thing here in the plains. Sweeten it up. Yeah, because there was 2 railway houses there at Westerville too for old surface men. One was rented out to an old First World War pensioner family, but the other bloke, he worked on the railway, and they used to hoe the weeds around the siding, and then go up there and shovel the shingle up onto the ends of the maintenance. About 4 or sometimes 6 would be one time on the go up there on the old jigger, and then they had a ganger, and he was the boss. Then they worked for the day and shoveling. But someone said, well, the government knew where they were, but what would you do with them? They'd have to go on the dole otherwise. The train only went up twice a week. And he's supposed to unload, he'd go up, he's supposed to unload the truck we get fertiliser from it, and he'd, before they come back down again. But if you had it, said to the old guard, you didn't get unloaded, he'd leave it there until next time they come back. Right, the engine, we used to get out when they were shunting, and some drivers would let you ride around with them. One let me start the old engine off one night. Right here. I went all the way to Springburn in the engine with them one day.
Yeah.
Christ, that was a trip and a half. Oh, just sitting there. I had to be told where to sit. It was a good day, a fine day like this. But then the bridge at Mount Somers got damaged in flood. Next time I went up with them there and went as far as Cavendish, and they come home in reverse. But you'd be shoveling the coal going on up with a big train, and coming home you hardly had put your wood on, your coal on at all, so downhill run.
Yeah.
And it was a Sour Street night, and they're coming home in reverse. They used to get a big railway cover and put over the back of the cab. They could put the day in. One time they went up, way up in the plains, because it was all round top and grass and dead grass and hares. They stopped the train up there, went out and did a bit of hare shooting. They were running a bit ahead of schedule. But you had to watch out for fires that burn the bloody country up. And we used to send put cattle on rail there at Westerville for Addington sale. And lambs.
Yeah.
And the wool. It was quite a good service, but yeah, the railway was something else. But long before my time, they used to run a passenger train up and at night, take the kids home from school, and then bring them back next morning, and drop them off at Westerville and take the rest on to town. That was before my time, but some of my cousins did it. One of my cousins, he used to take a bucket full of spuds, and there was some delivery boys around the town on bikes delivering groceries and that. But when the train's going through the town, so they'd be sitting on the bikes, he'd get out between the carriage and pelt them with spuds. That's a bit entertainment. Oh, he was a bloody hard case, that bugger. Christ, he was. There were sawmills around too. There's one up at Punawar, there's a big sawmill there. There's only about 1 mill left in the county now, I think. Timber was a big thing. A lot of logs put on at Westerfield on the train. A lot of work went on there. But see, yeah, the old blokes with their old jigger away up, they'd go and they'd have a boil up at lunchtime. But it was employment for them. It was just times changed. That's all about it. Sort of gang on. The old ganger. But then to service the railway houses, they had tradesmen on a train. The huts were on a wagon, and they lived in them. And then they'd drop them off there, say Westerville, painters and all sorts. They'd come and do the houses up every few years. They lived on these old huts on the train.
Oh.
Then they'd shift them around somewhere else. They did the one house up there properly, and then some Maoris arrived there, actually that murderer, the last murderer, he lived there with his parents, or not well, he wouldn't know who was who. One was called Social Security Ben, the old bloke. The joke was he couldn't work because he couldn't get his arm up any further than that. And someone said, how far do you used to be able to get? Oh, you used to get away up here, he said. We saw the house when they left. You've never seen anything like it knocked about. They cut the wood on the windowsills and fired it in, all the scrim and paper off the wall. And it didn't deserve that house. That's old history now, but oh no, he was Social Security Ben, that was his nickname. Big old Mary. There's a hell to do, and that murderer put the wind up a few. He murdered a taxi driver. And we had a blacksmith shop in Westfield too. It was self-taught. He was a real bloody tradesman, old Jack. Well, his old man had it before him, and they used to shoe a hell of a lot of horses and the old teams and that. He never had a welder, but he used to fire weld metal and get them both yellow and join them up.
Yeah.
You could take a set of harrows there, he'd take them to bits and weld a bit on the end of all the tines of them. You'd have several fires going. I used to work there sometimes as a striker, hitting things with a big sledgehammer for him. He never did that to his old shop. It was just, well, on a wet day, I had to watch where you stood, and bloody roof leaked, and Christ, it was a rough outfit. But my father bought that, and Val and I got married, he bought that land. That was the end of the blacksmith shop. That was, prior to that, there was a Larry's, the people who owned the blacksmith shop had a store there too. We inherited that store, and I think old Richard, it's gone now anyhow, but and they had a rifle club in Westerfield originally. The bloody big pine tree and the big wind blew and flattened the building, but it was quite a lively thing apparently, the rifle club. That's long before my time, but people used to talk about it. But I suppose people didn't travel around, they didn't just go to the old blacksmith. He only went to town every other Friday. That was his day, he did his business. Didn't jump in the car and head for bloody town or something. That was Westerfield. Of course, the old church over here was pretty popular. Well, it was pretty well attended too. We were dragged along there. I can tell you now, every bloody neighbour's car was, I can tell you what they arrived in. Times have changed, which is good. I'm not to get back to that. Oh, that's about all my bloody news, but yeah, that case started in Christchurch. They had a branch from Australia there. We was always in there talking to them, and he said, the boss said, I said, who you got in Ashburton? He said, why don't you take it on? I said, I never had the education. He said, you don't need any bloody education. So old Jay and I schemed up, we'd take it, we'd get a salesman, a parts man and a mechanic. And, oh Christ. Well, I ended up doing the selling. I learned that. We ended up the top bloody head case dealers in New Zealand.
Yeah.
Just with headers, they had a bloody good model header. The tractors were bloody expensive, but we sold some headers, made mistakes, but who hasn't? But it put us on the journey, and then Heston was good. We had a bloody good bit. The biggest curse of that place was bloody tax. You couldn't hide it. They brought the big man down in the tax vault in Christchurch to give me a lecture on bookkeeping, and that lasted till he got out the door. He hadn't put any stock in, and he had to write the stock down on another bloody know all the others. He come there and he said, you value put on the bloody tractor, and he said, you must be a bloody poor dealer if you couldn't lose all that money. Oh look, I said, everybody makes a mistake. Christ. I said to the old bastard, you're going to get me in the end. He said, yeah, but it's this year we're talking about. Christ, the bloody accountant, he went over the side like a boat, rat going over the side of a ship. He said, I thought you would have got prosecuted for that. Well, he was supposed to be advising. tax. But anyway, we put all those buildings up out of income.